Bryant. Good evening, good sir. How are you? What?
R.I.P. Matumbo, baby.
Oh,
Kimbe. I saw you shout out Pete Rose.
I forgot about
Kimbe.
that.
I mean, we're talking about two legends, one of ones, all-time greats.
Yeah, him and Pete
Kimbe.
Rose on the same day. That's it. That's freaking sad, Carter.
Oh, it's insane. Like, it really is insane. Like, Dikembe's probably the funniest NBA player ever.
Mhm.
He was so great in commercials. I know a few comics that have like funny stories interacting with him at just random places.
Mhm.
Yeah, a writer for ABC had a very funny story about an airport today. So that was great. But believe it or not, so the question was, and normally I'm not like Todd Pollitt's level when it comes to these kind of things. You said the last LSU running back with back-to-back receiving touchdown games.
Yes.
All right. So this
I
might
know who it is. I figured it out during the break.
Okay, on the count of three, we will say his name. All right.
1,
1,
2,
2,
3.
3.
Caden
John
Durham.
Emery. It was John.
It's Caden Durham because he was the technical last person to do it because he just did it.
Well, please go jump into an erupting volcano. I actually do think it was John Emery. I think it was. Now, it would have to be back-to-back games. So he didn't have a whole lot of
So people watching this on YouTube that didn't see it live, my question before Carter came on here was, who was the last running back to have back-to-back games with a receiving touchdown? But you think it's John Emery.
Yes. So I think because, John didn't like score a whole lot.
Well,
It just comes down to 2022. Now, I know okay.
He had the one against Bama.
Yes, and then he had one. It wasn't the previous week, but there was a bye week. I think he had one on the road versus Florida. Or was that called back for penalty? I don't know. I think
no, you're right. It was the first touchdown. Remember, Jaden threw it to him. You might be right.
So someone please go look it up because
I
like showing John Emery some love because we would be a lot better football team if he was still.
Maybe Brian Kelly does get his playmakers the football in space.
Maybe I think it was John. I think it was John. But
yeah, that's a very good pull by you. That's what she said. All right, let's get to this open-ended question because look, I don't know what to make of South Alabama, but I leave it open-ended to you. Let's start with the offense. How did you think the offense looked against South Alabama last week?
Yeah, I thought, as great as Cade Durham was, I thought my highest graded player was Garrett Dellinger. I mean, he really played unbelievably well. And normally these kinds of things kind of, play itself out. But I did see people who know more about football than me tweeting out Garrett Dellinger clips. And what makes that impressive is like he's not.
I think it was Kublik today that pointed him out a lot. Yeah.
I think it was Cube, and I think someone else like kind of randomly pointed him out. And I think his NFL draft stock is shooting up quite a bit. He really popped for me in this last game. Once again, it's South Alabama, but like
with a really small D line too. And I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but
yeah. So I do want to show him Deli some love, but I mean, Cade Durham's a story. I mean, the guy was truly spectacular in this game, just dusting people. I don't even think he's running at full speed. And he's just special. And the thing that's interesting, Blake, is you were really high on Cade Durham. I was too. He was my number one rated player with Deshaun Spears. It had the same grade for me coming into this class. The thing that really concerned me about him going into this year is that, when he played in Texas, he would just one cut and just dust everybody. Like, it was insane. But what's really impressive is he's good at like all these little nuances of running back play, getting skinny through the hole, making your offensive line look a lot better. So much was made of Miles Frazier falling on his ankle into the end zone. Small defensive line be damned, Blake. As you know from watching that play, there was a missed assignment where a DT had a chance to make a play and DJ Chester was in the backfield. And it was like those two mammoth human beings weren't even there. I mean, it was just one little jump cut. Then he was able to get vertical, get skinny in the hole. And those kinds of things you really didn't see from him in high school because it was just so many 70 and 80-yard runs. So the fact that he is so good at these little things, like you saw in the South Carolina game, a lot of goal line runs, a lot of his best runs in that game.
Vision's really good. That's his best attribute, in my opinion, his vision.
Yes, and I did not expect that. I thought he would be a very explosive, dominant player. Once again, I thought he was the best player in the class, but the fact that he is so good at these little things right out of the gate lets you know that, he's got, to use the best example, this Ryan Williams of Alabama. They have these little nuances in their game that you don't expect from players this young. So that shows you Cade Durham has really good football IQ for a young player. And he's just got a good feel for the game as he moves forward in his career.
Look, I'm just going to bring it up and ask you because I get labeled this anyway. Might as well feed into the beast at this current moment. Your thoughts on – look, let me start it off like this before I get killed. I thought Garrett looked pretty good. First half was pretty amazing, to be real with you, until the end of the first half. Carter, I hate the 2 interceptions. Horrible. I would have rathered him throw an interception where a guy just makes a really good play on it. That's not this. The decision-making has been porous. But other than that, dude played a pretty flawless game, man.
Yeah, so he sets his career high in passing yardage. And then, obviously, the 2 viral throws, Jordan retweeted this out.
Mason Taylor throws NFL level.
Yeah, and the Aaron Anderson throw was also really good.
Yeah.
RPO throw to Kyron was very underrated. There was a DT right in his face, and he was able to get it up and down. And it wasn't like a simple RPO. You had to get it over the DT and then over the overhang linebacker. I mean, he really did some good things. I will say one thing that makes this a little bit different than South Carolina was there were a lot of turnover-worthy plays in that game, where in this game there were only a few. There was those 2 and then a few others that I would consider to be shaky. So the end of first half interception was bad. I think situationally, though, it's one of those things where he's trying to make a play and it's just a bad throw. He should have never thrown it. Now, the second, and I've been labeled like a big Nuss defender. The second one, I will say, I thought Joe Sloan overall called a really good game. I didn't like the play design on the second one, but you still can't be late over the middle on the backside like that. And like the thing that really concerned me about that one is he got very, very, very casual. He's fading away, didn't need to. He had a really good pocket. I don't mind if QBs fade away when they throw the football, only if you need to, though. He really didn't need to. And, I just think he just had a lapse in judgment. He got a little too casual. The game was comfortably in hand, and that leads to bad habits. So that really concerned me more than the interception itself. And, Gary needs to stay on top of those things. But like you said, he's still playing really well. And Blake, I asked this question on Twitter, and I'll ask you right now. Outside of Jalen Milroe, who has played better in the SEC than Garrett Nussmeier to this point?
I don't know if you're putting me on the spot because I don't want to do like I did last time and people just get mad at me just throwing guys' names out. Okay.
Oh, however, so you don't have to answer. You don't have to.
I'm not going to. But I mean, was Garrett definitely up there? 100%. He's definitely up there. I'm tired of the bad decision making. Carter, this is something that's plagued him from the beginning. Has he gotten better in areas? 100%.
No.
1,000%. But Carter, I don't think people understand that. I mean, he's throwing it all over the place, and that's fine. Okay. However, you can't make these mistakes throughout the season. If you're going to do it against South Alabama, what leads me to believe you don't do it elsewhere? The best defense you saw, okay, in South Carolina, which is, I think they're the best in my opinion. They're 23rd in passing yards allowed. They're one of the best defensive lines in the country. Carter, that's what I'm talking about. Those are things that get you beat. And let me throw this out there too. You know why I'm so worried about it? Look at Carson Beck this week. Now, I get what you'd say. Oh, he might be better. He might be this. Those decisions lose you football games. Carter, this is how I'd label it. If I would have told you this time a week ago that there was going to be a half, you don't know which half, but there's going to be a half that LSU and South Alabama are tied at 7. Because that's what happened in the second half. They tied at 7. Okay. We would have really freaked out about what this team looks like. Just because it happened in the second half means nothing to me about that situation whatsoever. Before you came on, I came out here and said, I think that this team is on the cusp of being a playoff team because of the flashes that they show, Nussmeier included. He is showing flashes of one of the best quarterbacks in the country. However, you're not playing the level of opponents that you play down the stretch. You're not.
Yeah, so I'm actually in agreement with you, Blake. I think one of the more disappointing things of this entire season is how poorly LSU played in that second half, because this honestly was going to be the first full 4-quarter victory that LSU has had up to the season, where you can legitimately say both halves of football they played really, 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 really well in all facets. I even said on my halftime show of the game, Blake, I was like, I'm so excited that we're about to see a second half domination. And the thing that was very concerning, and this is Garrett Nussmeier included, was the experienced guys that were getting burned and making mistakes. And I was like, that's not who you would expect. You would think it would be a lot of freshmen who are playing for the first time.
So stop right there. That's a culture problem for the players that you have that are upperclassmen. And that part of the culture's got to change. Either the young guys got to come in there and change it, or they got to change it for them damn selves.
Yeah, I mean, that's a game where you just want to just stomp them out. And look, Blake, I think one underrated aspect of all of this going into the game is how big of a factor it was that Cade and Durham did what they did versus them. Because I don't think South Alabama going into the game thought that they would be 14-0 down because of one person. It was one person. Now, were there other people that did well? Yeah, Mason Taylor's block, Kyle Parker's block, all those things. But it was mostly Cade and Durham, right, that did these really special things.
Right.
And South Alabama is not a team that is built to play from behind. So, yes, the LSU defense did a lot better job. And Ahmad Bro did some really good things fitting the run, and the defensive line overall did well. But South Alabama was really taken out of their game plan early because they underrated, and I think a lot of people at this point has underrated how good Cade and Durham is. So when you're up 14-0, that makes defense so much easier, especially a team that is shell-shocked in that moment, right?
100%.
So I think people tend to forget how much that helped the LSU defense, right? Because that essentially, when you're down 14-0, that takes Bothwell out of the game. It does. So the bottom line, Blake, is I'm still very concerned about the LSU defense. I am. One big positive, though, and once again, it's a one-game sample, is Greg Penn and Whit Weeks were phenomenal. They were freaking all over the place.
Against what was a top 10 rushing attack before you played.
Yeah, and once again, Cade and Durham helps with that, spotting a 14-point lead.
Yep.
But what South Alabama did a really good job of is they really made linebackers' jobs hell, right? Because you don't see many quarterbacks as fast as South Alabama at the G5 level. You don't see 220-pound freshman running backs like Fluff Bothwell. And they were non-factors. Greg Penn really orchestrated a really beautiful defensive performance. He deserved the game ball. And I like that Whit Weeks got the post-game interview. He did a lot of good things as well. Really pumped up about that, Blake. And those two guys, I mean, I'm excited about Debo Atkins. I think he'll eventually become a really good rotational player this year. That's how much I like him. But those two guys, if God forbid either one of them go down, the season's over. I mean, that's how good they played. And that's how, big of a drop-off it is if we can't have them. So
there's no defensive issues that we have right now that are worse than the turnovers that you're committing. Zero. It's not one. I don't care what anybody tells me. Carter, you cannot have those type of plays, brother. You can be worried about I'm worried about the defense just as much too. I think they play some really good offenses that are going to expose them. However, okay, what happens when you turn the ball over to those teams?
Oh, so you're talking – I thought you're talking about LSU's turn. Okay, you're talking about LSU's offensive interceptions concern you more than the defense.
No, well, their turnovers – okay, are going to lead for that defense to get back out there. And I know it's a tough place to put Garrett in, but the one thing that you have to understand and know, you cannot turn the football over like that. Carter, that was as worst of decision-making as you can get. Now, the first one, I'm actually going to give him. The first one doesn't bother me at all. The first one, look, man, he got baited. Bottom line is the kid was a senior DB. He got baited by a 24-year-old. That's the God's honest truth. I'm going to call it what it is. The second one pisses me off. And because we continue, screw the play call. Live to fight another down. Throw the ball away. I don't think people right now fully understand when you make those bad mistakes, you know what happens? You go down to Alabama 28-0.
Yeah. So, and one thing I think really hurts Garrett Nussmeier, okay, and I'm very pro Nuss, is when every single one of your plays.
I am too. I don't want to be labeled the guy that I'm not, because I think he's exceptional in things that he does. I just want to, again, make that very well known because people hate me for this.
Yeah. Okay. So this actually is one thing I think that really hurts Garrett Nussmeier is when he is playing quarterback, he plays the game as if every play is a failure if he does not throw the football.
1,000%.
Okay.
Bingo.
So what do I mean by that? I've shared this point plenty of times. Well, Garrett Nussmeier never gets sacked. He never gets sacked. Now, does it help that he has a really good offensive line and tight end when it comes to pass protection? It does. But the fact that you never, ever, ever get sacked is ridiculous. Pressure to sack ratio, all that stuff. That normally means you're a pretty good quarterback. But sometimes sacks are good. We want a sack, right? South Carolina game was a perfect example of that. Sometimes we want a sack. That's it.
I'd rather you take the sack that you were going to have than throw it in triple coverage. Don't. Carter, there's a strong possibility. All right, I just want to throw this out there. You should be 3-2 right now instead of 4-1. You should be.
Yeah.
But and that's the part that I'm trying to make, that I do think that you have the ability against Arkansas, against Ole Miss, against Florida, against A&M. Carter, you have the ability to beat them, and you are on the cusp of being a borderline, if not a playoff team. But the number one thing that will get you beat more than anything that the defense has done is those turnovers. So, it's the reason that it's the biggest stat. When you go look at a box score in a game you don't watch, if a team got blown out and the stats are about the same, what do you think? You go and look at turnovers.
Well, ask Saints fans that this weekend.
So do you get my point?
No, I'm with you.
That's what I'm trying to. That's what irritates me more than anything. We got a couple of super chats in here, and then we'll get to the defense. Stephen Young with a $10 super chat says, I don't think that we're appreciating Durham enough. He's doing the same thing he did in high school, but he adjusted college play. Even when the O-line is pushed back, he gets yards. Your thoughts on that?
No, he's right on. I mean, and the to Stephen's point, that was a point I was making a minute ago. Like, it's crazy that, like, you could go look at his high school tape. Like, it actually gets a little boring because it's just 80-yard bombs like every single time because he's just so much more faster than everyone. There's been no adjustment to having to pick up ugly yards. So you're getting some of the home run hitting mixed in with all these other things that some running backs, it takes, their first year in a pro football or second year in a pro football. It's just ridiculous how good he is at these little things. And Stephen, thank you for your support.
Yeah.
And I'll say this as well. The one final thing on Nuss, like before we go to the defensive side. All right. So it's not just, taking sacks. I don't want Garrett to take sacks. I want that to be known. But sometimes it's a good thing. Also, Blake, sometimes running is just a good thing. All right. So, yes.
Do you think I got to ask this in the postgame show. Do you think he's scared to run?
A little, yes. Because, he's not the biggest guy, right? Especially if you waited for
Steven, who called into the show and asked. But
yeah. So you waited 4 full years to get this job, and we know how much Garrett loves LSU. I know his mother's ties and all that stuff to Louisiana and stuff like that. His ties to Louisiana as well. Yeah, I think that's a concern. And look, Blake, sometimes it is concerning for me that every single Garrett Nussmeier play ends with a ball being thrown in play. So part of why the interceptions are so high is because in his mindset, he's thinking every single time I want to make a play. All right. When sometimes the best thing you can do is just scramble for 3 yards and fall down. Right. So perfect example of this.
You mean like his predecessor?
Yeah. Well, yes, but Jaden is just completely different. But
I get that. But there were times where the pocket was collapsing and Jaden knew, hey man, I'd rather take a 3-yard sack than a 7-yard sack. Sometimes you got to give up on a play.
Yeah, and honestly, the best who I have ever seen at that is actually Burrow, right?
No doubt.
Yeah, I mean,
no doubt.
The funny thing is, if you actually go back and look at the Clemson game was really won outside of Jamar Chase was Burrow avoiding huge 80-yard sacks. It was, he was just dodging bullets. It really looked like the Matrix. How many unblocked blitzers Clemson had in that game, and Joe was just able to avoid them like they were nothing. And he will take a 3-yard sack compared to an 8-yard sack, and that
which is massive.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Listen, I'll say it like this. Kalen DeBoer said this today, and I got to give him credit for it. Nothing means more to me than points. Nothing. And he said that. And people need to realize, and you know what he followed it up with? Nothing is bigger than turning the football over, and going for it on 4th down was my fault. He talked about them going for it on 4th down as an example was a problem in the sense of that they could have put the game away and pinned them deep and them not get back into the football game. And there's a reason it's called turnover on downs. I actually don't want to get to the defense. I want to ask you a different question if that's okay. But Stephen Young did say Witt is great though with a $2 super chat. 100%. He played phenomenal. Any thoughts on Witt very quickly?
Oh, he's phenomenal. Yeah, we can go on. I mean,
okay. So Carter, we're at a bye week. So for the first 5 weeks, let's just call it a little bit less than a little bit more of a quarter of a season. Where do you see this team going? Projecting out, now that we've got 5 games under our belt, where do you see this team going for the rest of the year?
Yeah, this is big. So I'll make this point along with the Burrow point. When you play these tougher teams, I really do think when you play the elite of the elite defenses that are buttoned up, the Kane Womacs of the world, Coach Partridge and Ole Miss are going to be good, especially with Garrett Nussmeier. They're going to have a great game plan. You have to take some of these 4-yard runs and just get down, right? For instance, on the rollout to Kyle Parker, it was a target of Kyle Parker. Just run for 3 yards and take the yards that they're giving you, right? It was a low percentage target. Now, could it have been caught and could the throw have been absolutely perfect? Sure, but take those yards every now and then because it makes the defense have to respect you, and that's going to be so big, right? Because teams are going to scheme thinking, hey, we know the guy wants to throw. So outside of one, QB draw in the red zone, teams are still not going to expect you to scramble, even though if you've never scrambled per se. But Blake, I think you hammered everything correctly. LSU has a very real path to the playoff. Now, these are 2 completely different points. Is LSU a playoff caliber team? No, they are not a playoff caliber team. But you can be a non-playoff caliber team, but still make the playoff based on your circumstances, right? Michigan State's a good example of this in the 14 playoff. If things go your way and the schedule breaks go your way, well, that's what's happened to LSU this year. Blake, you do an SEC show. Congrats on the new SEC channel.
Oh, thank you.
Congrats to you on Joel.
At AYS-sports on SEC or AYS-sports-SEC.
So go subscribe. The most important thing is getting him to 1,000 subscribers. So please, I mean, there's 1,000 people that watch the show every week. So this is something that LSU fans need to comprehend, okay? There is a clear, level of difference of 4 teams in the SEC, and then there's everyone else, all right? There's Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, and Alabama, all right? Those 4 are way better football teams than everyone else, okay? We'll see how Ole Miss rebounds from here. We'll see what happens with Missouri. Missouri still has a very real path to the playoff with their schedule. Oklahoma's tricky.
They got A&M this week, their first road test. So.
Right. But would you agree that those 4 teams –
I agree that those 4 teams are the cream of the crop, yeah.
Right. And I think most people would expect before the season, including myself, that Ole Miss would be closer to those teams.
And they still might be.
But their first real test, they did not look good.
Correct.
So before the season, this was my biggest point about LSU season. It wasn't about Garrett Nussmeier. It wasn't about Bryant. It wasn't about anything. This was the easiest LSU schedule ever that I've ever seen in the modern era. This was the easiest. And you would have never
– in SEC play.
Yeah, but also on top of that, UCLA just sucks. There's not a good football team.
Fair.
So not only is it easy, your toughest games, you're getting huge breaks, right? You're getting this huge bye week advantage over Ole Miss. You're getting a bye week before Alabama, and they have a bye as well, but that game's being played in Baton Rouge. And then Oklahoma is, not as good as anyone thought they would be offensively, but they're going to be good at the end of the season. They got to play Alabama the week before coming to Tiger Stadium. Y'all, the playoff is still very much a real possibility. Do I think LSU is going to get there, Blake? I do not. I think this team is just flawed enough to where they're going to find 2 losses here the rest of the way. And here's the thing. Most people immediately think those 2 losses are going to come against Ole Miss and Alabama. And
that Ole Miss win, I feel like the fan base feels like that they should win it now.
Yes. But going into the season, most probably felt that those were going to be the 2 SEC losses.
I feel like the fan base feels, which I don't agree with.
Yes.
I feel like the fan base agrees with this. The only game that we should lose from here on out is Bama.
Right. They're better than you. I think
God, heavens, yes.
I think they're a level. I didn't think it'd be a level, but they're a level above right now. And that's going to give me killed, but that's fine. What I will
we got to talk about reality and stop pussyfooting around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you're going to do with Ryan Williams. I don't know what you're going to do with Trey Harris. That's going to be the big question going into this bye week.
You take away Trey Harris, you might take away their offense.
True, and you can't necessarily say that about Alabama. But
right,
what I would say though, Blake, is things do set up nicely. I think they'll lose either one versus A&M or Arkansas. The back-to-back road thing sucks. They also have athletic freaks at quarterback, the dual threat quarterback stuff, back-to-back road trips. Neither of those quarterbacks are that good, but it's tough, as you know, Blake, playing quarterbacks in back-to-back weeks.
But there's a strong path, because let me tell you why. Both of those quarterbacks, okay, Texas A&M is 116th in passing yards this year. They're awful throwing the football around. And Taylor Green, the 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's been below 50% in 2 of them, and he was below 60% in the last one. If you make that kid beat you by throwing the football, he's in trouble.
Oh, they're terrible throwers. I would be the first to admit that.
So again, Carter, there's another whole side of this argument where I'm like, shit, you can beat them. I think you're more talented than Carter outside of Ole Miss from a depth perspective. You're deeper, that's what she said, than any one of these teams that you play until Bama.
So let me ask you this. Do you how confident are you this team loses 2 more games?
About 75 to 80%.
Okay. That's about where I am. I might be a little bit.
I also, though, in all of this saying, I can see the path. I can see the path of that being a possibility. Carter, you threw this out there. I'm about to get laughed at the building. You ready? You can't mess around with Vandy. You're going to beat Vandy. Okay. You can't mess around with Vandy.
All right, let's see. Vanderbilt has a bye week before they go to Baton Rouge.
I know. That's why I'm throwing it out there.
And think about it like
this.
Really
well-coached team. And look, you're going to beat them. You get what I'm saying. But the point that I'm making is that I have enough data at the current moment where I feel like for me that I can say you have a clear path of beating this team, and here's why. Outside of Bama, there's no other one.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about the Vandy game all that much. The Clark
somewhat tongue in cheek.
No, you shouldn't be because one thing.
What if you play a half? Here's what I do know. Vandy's better than South Alabama, and here's what I do know. You went tied in a half against South Alabama.
All right, so there's a few things about the Vandy side of it that's interesting. So Pavia has already beaten a team on the road in a major upset. He did it last year, New Mexico State going into Auburn, right? And then, the bye week, the Clark Lee angle going up against Brian Kelly. And I don't know. I haven't really thought about that game, but maybe I should. Because look,
you can't discredit them.
And let's just say Tennessee is the freaking team and they're undefeated. Maybe Vanderbilt's like, okay, there's no way we're going to beat Tennessee. So let's really put the foot on the gas here versus LSU.
Here's what I also know. Clark Lee is going to want to get one on his former head coach.
Yeah, I mean, one and this was kind of anecdotal. So Blake, as you know, the NFL channel for me is doing really well, and I do a lot of Jaden stuff. One thing that was very interesting, Blake, was like Cliff Kingsbury unloaded a lot of things in this game versus Arizona, like things that I had not seen yet.
I wonder why.
And I was like, holy shit, that's his former team. And I know a lot of people are like, no, duh, but like he unloaded the clip on them and he put the foot on the gas like the entire game. So I blew
that.
Okay, and then
I just emptied the clip. Sorry.
All right. One other thing is Tennessee on the road versus Oklahoma earlier this year. Josh Heupel, coaches versus their former mentors. They love to take it to them.
He let off the gas so much in that game too.
Yeah, he did. And
Dylan Sampson, dude. They just kept giving the ball to Sampson, a dude that we shouldn't have missed on. But
beast mode.
What do I know? All right, Carter, the Power Bryant, always fantastic. I'm gonna might try to get you on again this week, just in a different spot, different channel, and